Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope the week's gone well. Ours has been quite busy. Let me start up with a very exciting development. We've got Eliud Kipchoge, who's been described as the greatest marathoner of the modern era. Up next at Mindspeak, details to follow. We're very excited about that. In between now and then, he's going to Tokyo. I spoke to him yesterday on the phone, and I'm very excited about that particular Mindspeak. Hopefully he'll talk about winning, where he came from, and the whole sort of sports economy, which has grown extraordinarily. This is my interview with Safaricom's acting CEO and Chief Financial Officer, Satish Kamath, and also we've uploaded the investor briefing that I attended on Wednesday this week. Macro thoughts. What really triggered the latest emerging market rout, asks markets, and this is a theme. Obviously, it's ebbed a little bit today, but we've had a significant sell-off. Apple hit a fresh lifetime high after a credit card deal with Goldman Sachs, now on course to become the first $1 trillion company. And then I like this as well from JS Blockland, the age of technology in one chart. This is from A-Safe, an ode to Nairobi. It's a photograph he took of the city at night. It always looks much more beautiful than it might be on ground level at the moment with all the rains that we've had. The answer to life, the universe, and everything might be 73 or 67. A crisis of cosmic proportions is brewing. The universe is expanding 9% faster than it ought to be, and scientists are not sure why. One of my favorite quotes from Hunter S. Thompson: "Buy the ticket, take the ride." I came across an old book of poetry of Ghalib, which I hadn't read, I must say, and become so engrossed in it. And I'll share some more poems from it. What I like about him, he has that uncertainty which makes him human. Ghalib mused how Qiyamah, doomsday, has failed to arrive in spite of the numerous conflicts plaguing it. Said I one night to a pristine seer who knew the secrets of whirling time, "Sir, you well receive the goodness and faith, fidelity and love have all departed from this sorry land. Father and son are at each other's throat, brothers fight brothers. Unity and federation are undermined. Despite these ominous signs, why has not doomsday come? Why does not the last trumpet sound? Who holds the reins of the final catastrophe?" And then this, where he's buried is Hazrat Nizamuddin, near the tomb of Nizamuddin Alia, and there is written, "The happiness of the world is nothing for me, for my heart is left with no feeling besides blood." Political reflections. I keep going back to the song by The Prodigy called Fire Starter. Yesterday I tweeted, so who exactly is the fire starter? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Bibi Netanyahu? Is it MBS? Is it MBZ? Is it Ayatollah Khamenei? Is it Hassan Rouhani? And this is a question we need to answer. Israeli soldiers in this photograph are seen near the Syrian border. As we know, the Gulf states, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain were the first four countries to welcome Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran deal. This new anti-Iran alliance between Israel and its Sunni Arab neighbors is a development of historic proportions. I wrote about it when I talked about the capture of a wannabe king. Essentially was saying the Crown Prince had been captured by Bibi Netanyahu, Jared Kushner. That said, Ambassador John Bolton is confident that an Iranian regime change will occur in the next 6 months. Have a look at this video from Zero Hedge. Before 2019, we will celebrate in Tehran. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, whom I met here in Nairobi once, they need to remember the saying that if it rains on us, it will storm on them. Netanyahu claimed Iran crossed a red line and the Israeli response using airstrikes was appropriate. The New Yorker has a very in-depth article why Netanyahu really wanted Trump to scuttle the Iran deal. On Wednesday night, 20 rockets were fired from Syria at the Golan Heights by, according to Israel, Iran's Quds Force. Some got through Israel's advanced missile defense shield, but there were no injuries. Israel responded by launching 70 missiles, killing at least 23 fighters, including 5 Syrian troops and 18 allied militiamen. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said the IDF had destroyed nearly all of Iran's military infrastructure in Syria. The Iranian attack had been expected for days now. The Israeli media has been full of reports of people on the Golan cleaning out their shelters. On April 9th, Israel reportedly attacked the T-4 Syrian Air Force base near Homs. 7 members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, who had apparently been establishing an airbase, complete with anti-aircraft batteries, were killed. Last week, Israel reportedly bombed a major cache of Iranian missiles north of Hama in Syria. Everyone knows Israel has conducted over 100 such attacks, the veteran Syrian analyst Charles Glass told me in a telephone conversation from London. Iran threatened retaliation, which came last night. The Netanyahu government, for its part, is both anticipating a crisis and helping to precipitate one. On April 26, Avigdor Lieberman told the Saudi newspaper El Af that Israel did not want war, but if the Islamic regime attacks Tel Aviv, Israel will strike Tehran and destroy every Iranian military site that threatens Israel in Syria, whatever the price. Lieberman also insisted that Israel will maintain freedom of operations in Syria and respond forcefully to any party there with the capacity to launch missiles or to attack Israel or even our aircraft. Not coincidentally, Trump's abandonment of the nuclear deal means that the US will have to prepare detailed contingency plans for an attack on Iran's nuclear sites, which are spread throughout the country. Meanwhile, the US has been backing Israel's preemptive actions in Syria and southern Lebanon. Ephraim Halevi, who was a former Mossad chief, normally preaches restraint, told Israel's Channel 10 that Russia got Syria to establish itself and will stay the course. It will not accept the defeat of Iran, its regional partner. Israel will not seek a confrontation with Russia. But if, he said, God forbid, confrontation is unavoidable, Israel will have to come out with the upper hand. He might have added that Israel would never count on having the upper hand without American help. Iranian leaders must also know that the same technological asymmetry that encourages Israeli leaders to suppose they can decisively win a war of airplanes, drones, and missiles also makes the Israeli economy far more vulnerable than that of Lebanon or Syria, should war be protracted. Attack Beirut's airport for a month and Hezbollah is hardly affected. Attack Ben Gurion airport for a month and the startup nation shuts down. What was so interesting was how the media reported it entirely from Israel's perspective. Reports do show that it was Israel who first lobbed some missiles across the border that triggered this reaction, Syrian reaction, to which they then responded. Is it just me, or does Mahathir Mohamad look really good for being 92, asks the stalwart. I'd agree with James Lockhart, who was talking about Malaysia and saying, I would add potentially very good news from a corruption ESG perspective. Now, what about that $700 million? And this is the point I was making. I think Mahathir, the market sold off, and I think that was a mistake. If anything, we're under a more constructive leadership. It's not of the Zuma Ramaphosa swing, but it's meaningful. Europe can no longer rely on the US to protect itself. This is Angela Merkel. Europe's decisions shouldn't be driven by fear. That's Emmanuel Macron at the Charlemagne Prize ceremony where they both were speaking. As Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un prepared to meet on June 12, here are some of the terms of endearment they've had for each other. This is from Jamie at Reuters. Trump on Kim, rocket man, madman, maniac, bad dude. Kim on Trump, mentally deranged dotard, old lunatic, rogue and gangster. My question remains, and this was a question I posed in April this year, what security guarantees can Trump provide to Kim that convince him to denuclearize? The question remains as follows. Kim Jong-un can hardly forget what happened to Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, both of whom met their ends after being defanged. So my question remains, what security guarantees can Trump provide to Kim? Offering up bulletproof security guarantees is the equivalent of threading the needle. Same time, April, I was writing a piece quoting Kim, who said, a new history starts now, an age of peace from the starting point of history. And I was saying the events that took place that Friday at the truce village of Panmunjom and during the Inter-Korean summit were breathtaking for the Hollywood optics. The opening shot of Kim Jong-un surrounded by a phalanx of North Korean officials, later replayed as Chairman Kim sat in his presidential vehicle, surrounded by his ninja bodyguards, was almost as good as the opening sequence in P.T. Anderson's Boogie Nights. This was cinema of the highest level, which is no surprise when you consider that Kim Jong-il, the father, was obsessed with cinema and amassed arguably the world's largest personal film collection, over 20,000 bootlegged 35mm screening copies. Kim Jong-il also had a penchant for Hennessy parody cognac, and for 2 years in the mid-90s he was the world's largest buyer of Hennessy parody cognac, importing up to $800,000 of the stuff a year. Kim Jong-il began his career as the head of the state's propaganda and agitation department, and it's clear that Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong, holds the same role and evidently handles all the optics as a chip off the old block. Friday, I said, was tip-top geopolitical optics. Marwan Bashar, of course, was jaded by the optics and said when pictures are the news and symbols are the facts, cliches become truths and media turns into propaganda or BS. So as I said, front and center in Kim's mind must be the image of Saddam Hussein being hung by his neck and Muammar Gaddafi meeting his death. I also said that North Korea is the buffer state between China and more than 30,000 US soldiers parked on their doorstep in South Korea. And I was speculating in February after the visit of the sister that South Korea is set to be peeled off, and going by his puppy dog smiles, President Moon River will be in Pyongyang before he can pronounce Kim Yo-jong correctly. I also was saying Russia always had their back, China, and this is the buffer state. And then in September 2017, at the height of the Rocket Man period, I quoted Gravity's Rainbow, a 1973 novel by Thomas Pynchon, which is about the design, production, and dispatch of V-2 rockets by the German military. In particular, it features the quest undertaken by several characters to uncover the secret of a mysterious device named the Schwarzkey ring, slated to be installed in a rocket with the serial number 00000. As the world watches Pyongyang, I cannot help wondering if Kim Jong-un has read Pynchon, which speaks of a screaming that comes across the sky in North Korea. It is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed, once or twice guessed and refused to believe, that everything always, collectively, had been moving toward that purified shape, latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. And then in November 2010, when Kim Jong-il was still alive, I was wrote a piece that started, "Far away in distant lands lies the hermit kingdom. They've all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker." The Bank of England cut its 2018 GDP forecast to 1.4% from 1.7% in February, lowering the next 2 years' outlook as well. Lowered the inflation outlook to 2021. Sterling fell a full cent to 135.10 before a recovery. The ruble is doing something almost unheard of in recent months, rallying because of oil up 0.21%. Oil warfare has been flipped on its head, right? Obama was bringing it down to put pressure on Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia. President Trump has taken it up to ease his favored crown prince into the king's position in Saudi Arabia. Fair warning, just in case at the current pace the Treasury yield curve inverts by the summer. This is all about the flattening we're seeing in the yield curve in the US. Currency markets, euro dollar around 119. Dollar index lost to the 93 handle, 92.75. Japanese yen 109.39. Swiss franc 10029. The pound 135.09. The Aussie 0.7535. Indian rupee 67.225. South Korean won 1068.59. Brazilian real 355.08. Egyptian pound 17.6960. And the rand 1231.59. Dollar index last trading at 92.75, slipped off the 93 handle, but I'm still bullish about the dollar. Euro dollar popped up to 119.03. Let's see if we can push up any higher than this. Brent crude futures have been on a storming run, 3.5-year highs. I think it's gotten a little ahead of itself now. EIA has raised Brent crude oil price forecast by $7 a barrel in 2018, but it expects prices to gradually decline through 2019. Gold blipped higher, 13.19.20. Very interesting piece by Jamie at Reuters. Emerging markets risk, vicious dollar yields reserves spiral. It goes something like this. Rising dollar-denominated debt refinancing costs hit emerging currencies, triggering capital outflows, prompting central bank intervention, which pushes yields and the dollar even higher. There is an inverse relationship between the dollar and global FX reserves, a large chunk of which consists of US Treasury notes and bonds. A falling dollar is generally associated with looser global financial conditions, increased cross-border capital flows, strong growth and rising trade surpluses across emerging markets. Those surpluses are used to build up FX reserves, but a rising dollar has the opposite effect, and the pace of reserve accumulation slows or even reverses. Less than a year after issuing a 100-year government bond, Argentina needs IMF support. Argentine bonds rally after news of IMF standby arrangement. And then, if you want to have an idea of what kind of sell-off we saw before this morning, here's a chart from Bloomberg. The US is signaling a new approach to its Horn of Africa ally, that's Ethiopia. And in this article, they're referring to the House of Representatives unanimously adopting House Resolution 128, supporting respect for human rights and encouraging inclusive governance in Ethiopia. And saying this resolution could give Abiy a free hand to deal more decisively with those resisting change. So far, he's been very conciliatory and accommodating. The TPLF has ruled Ethiopia for the last 27 years with the support of the US and the UK. If it loses this support, financial, military, diplomatic, etc., it has very little else to stand on. October 2016, I was talking about how the government need to change tack and effect a course correction. And history shows us that this course correction is one of the most difficult things to pull off. Interesting piece in the Mail and Guardian, remembering a warlord Democrat. This is about Renamo's Alfonso Dhlakama. Renamo, of course, lost their leader. He's been buried this week. And For 38 years, Dhlakama led Renamo proved to be an accomplished guerrilla leader, building a rebel group from 7 to 6 members in 1977 to almost 20,000 in 1992. Saying he was quixotic, prone to changing his mind, and often influenced by the last person he had spoken to. Peacetime politics was difficult for him, but in the last few years he had shown the political agility that surprised many. Dhlakama's lasting legacy is political pluralism in Mozambique and hopefully greater political devolution with elected provincial governorships. The Economist is saying a fragile recovery. Africa's economies are turning a corner. A montage of miracles plays on the giant screens in the Perez Dome, a Pentecostal church in Accra. A paralyzed man tosses away his crutches. A woman's tumor vanishes. It is only the sick who need help. I pray for businesses, intones the pastor, promising that struggling ones will resurrect. A stall outside sells recorded sermons on financial prophecy and creating wealth God's way. Someone up there is listening. After several tough years, Ghana's growth rate in 2017 was 8.4%, third fastest in the world. African economies often seem like victims of divine whimsy. Most of the continent's workers are farmers reliant on the rains. Much of its wealth comes from oil and minerals at the mercy of markets. When prices are high, as they were in the first decade of the century, Africa booms, but in recent times, drought and a commodity slump have stymied growth. In 2016, economies in sub-Saharan Africa grew by just 1.4%, the slowest rate for 2 decades. Now the gods are smiling faintly. Commodity prices are up. African governments have sold $12 billion of international bonds. The IMF is forecasting growth across sub-Saharan Africa at 3.4% this year. Abebe Emro Selassie, the director of the IMF's African department, plays up the potential for faster growth. The question I ask is, why isn't a country growing at 6 or 7%? But he frets that the recovery is fragile, rising debt or a weaker world economy could stop it in its tracks. Aggregate figures for the region are driven by 3 big economies, all recovering from recession. Nigeria and Angola stumbled, of course. Nigeria partly eased restrictions on its currency. Angola has let its currency slide by 28%. South Africa, the third big beast, is also on the mend, and I'm bullish about South Africa and Cyril Ramaphosa. These 3 countries are less of a drag on regional growth than they were, but their recoveries are modest. The IMF expects that income per person will shrink in all 3 in 2018 for the 4th consecutive year. This mirrors a wider trend. 12 countries with about 1/3 of the region's population, incomes per person declined last year. They will fall again in most of them this year. But 3 risks loom. The first is public finances. Governments have borrowed heavily to replace oil revenues or fund capital projects. The median level of public debt rose from 30% of GDP in 2012 to 53% last year. A second risk is the world economy. Distant trade wars could crimp demand for African raw materials. The third risk is politics. Elections typically rip holes in public budgets and can cause months of uncertainty. The only thing worse is not holding a vote at all. In the DRC, while billionaires bicker over cobalt, the president is driving his country off a cliff. Some think growth rates are a distraction. We don't see it. A more basic problem is how to share the benefits. There is reason to worry then when the IMF says that regional growth will hover below 4% for the next few years. Since populations are rising, income per person will creep up barely 1% a year. That makes Africa look more like Italy than China. Better keep praying. I wrote a piece, Africa Calling. Airtel is talking of raising $1.5 billion in Africa to pay debts in India. Not the story usually here. That's via the Hindustan Times. I thank Carlos Lopez for alerting me to that. Their debt profile has increased considerably. Beer volumes show surge in Zimbabwe, and saying this is positive from the perspective of consumer confidence. For the first time in at least 5 years, the country's main brewer, AB InBev affiliated Delta Corp, announced that sales volumes increased, with the company having said before that consumption of lager is tied to consumer confidence. President Kiir has sacked his central bank chief and deputy amid inflation surge and broke government. The White House said that the leaders of South Sudan had squandered this partnership with the US, pilfered the wealth of South Sudan, killed their own people, and repeatedly demonstrated their inability and unwillingness to live up to their commitments during the country's civil war. Exactly. 3 people were killed Thursday in an attack on a mosque in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province. The motive is not known. South African oil shares down 2.52% year to date. Dollar versus rand were back 12.31.59. I averaged down. We're in the money again. Egyptian pound 17.696. Moody's says Nigeria may keep its system of multiple exchange rates in place until at least 2020, or whenever Dangote's huge oil refinery is built. Nigerian oil shares up 6.99% year to date. Ghana was in the Eurobond market yesterday with a dollar deal offering a 10-year tranche with a yield in the low 8% area and a 30-year portion yielding about 9%. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 34.23% this year, the best performing stock exchange in Africa. Chinamasa says that Zimbabwe's economy is 96% cashless. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, because of these challenges, we've overtaken Kenya in terms of the number of transactions that are transacted electronically and through RTGS and through mobile. May 10th, I wrote a piece in a turbulent world. Safaricom is a must-have stock. As you know, they released full-year results which showed a 14.05% acceleration in full-year earnings per share. M-Pesa has been a growth engine. Whenever there's a cash transaction, we see an opportunity. Transaction value within the M-Pesa system doubled in 2017. I was also writing earlier on the 7th of May that Safaricom is a need, not a want, and that you need to buy the dip and enter the position if we react lower on the results. Centum issued a profits warning statement for the financial year ending 31st of March 2018. The share price is down 8% year to date, but it trades on a trading PE of just 3.683. Tanzanian billionaires have raised their Canal Kogel stake to 5.22%. I've been referencing high octane trading we'd seen in Canal Kogel. The share price has rallied 40.35% year to date. Share price data is on the web, is on the rich wrap-ups. Total Kenya, that's up 52.12% year to date. His Excellency President Ismail Gwele was received by Kengen at Olkaria, and it's estimated that there's about 2,000 megawatts of geothermal energy in Djibouti. This is a great opportunity for Kengen to collaborate with Djibouti, which is something they talked about. Well, they didn't mention Djibouti, but they mentioned geographical collaboration as an opportunity. We've seen evidence of that. A public notice on the acquisition of Express Kenya PLC by Dinis Holdings. That is an offer to acquire 38.36% of the ordinary shares. Kenya shilling is at 100.45. Nairobi all shares up 4.12% year to date, but has slipped 9.32% since hitting a record high on April 5. NSE 20 is down 2.05%. The search for 40 locals missing after the Patel Dam tragedy in Nakuru to resume Friday. The National Disaster Unit boss says 44 are dead, 41 in hospital. Entirely unfortunate. If you're interested in seeing the Safaricom investor briefing, that link is on Rich Wrap-Ups. Wazua is talking about housing finance, which paid its CEO 64 million shillings, half of the net profit for the group, and then was borrowing from other banks at market rates. The CMA, as I said, approved the offer document by Dinis Holdings and also approved the shareholders' circular by Express Kenya PLC. This is the buyout price of 5 shillings and 50 cents a share. Wishing you a great weekend.